Every kid born in the 80s remembers the early days of the console wars, the playground arguments about which was better, the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo.
Sega's Genesis is Nintendo's nemesis. It's one of two 16-bit systems that are already in the US. Nintendo, however, does not plan to relinquish any ground. It says technology's only one thing.
At a time when most kids were all about the Super Nintendo, I was firmly rooted in the Sega camp. But why? Why did we choose the consoles we did? I can't speak for everyone, but I'm going to tell you why I remained a Sega kid until the very end. Sega versus Nintendo came during a time when video games as an industry was rapidly growing, and those who didn't understand it were not happy about their kids planting themselves in front of the TV all day
They get so
long.
involved, they do not know what is going on around them.
Growing up, video games were considered children's entertainment, with every adult in my life attempting to make me understand how much of a waste of time they are, and that continuing to play them was going to get me nowhere. At that time, I had no concern about which direction video games were going to lead me. All I knew is that I was having fun, and isn't that what entertainment is all about? Whether or not you're having fun?
Really loving video games a lot.
Like sitting with a good book, movie, TV show, or whatever you're into. They were a comfort space for me, and they still are. I recognize it's human nature to reject things we don't understand, and many people growing up did not understand why I love Sega so much. Growing up, we didn't have much money, so we got what we got. As a kid, I would defend the games I had chosen because I had chosen them. Sure, some of them were great games, but at the end of the day, I made a decision, and since it was my decision, it had to be right? But it's more than that. While all my friends were getting a Super Nintendo for Christmas, I was opening the superior system, the Sega Genesis. I'll never forget that Christmas. We were at my grandparents' house and we opened our presents on Christmas Eve, which we had never done before. But see, this was different. We actually had to open our presents that night. The Genesis was a combined gift from my brother and me, and as soon as we opened it, we hooked it up and started playing Sonic the Hedgehog on my grandparents' 500-pound console television. About an hour or so into playing, my parents informed me that I would be going to stay the night with my uncle. Of course, I asked to bring the Sega. Mostly oblivious of what else was occurring, I gathered my things and off we went. My uncle and I stayed up very late playing Sonic, and he refused to go to sleep until we beat it, which means I didn't go to sleep until we beat it. And we did. We actually beat Sonic that night. And in the morning, we returned to my grandparents' house. But my grandfather, he wasn't there. See, while we opened presents the night before, my grandfather was there, but he was in a hospital bed that was against one of the walls. He had been sick with cancer for quite some time. And that night, while my uncle and I beat Sonic, he passed away. I didn't really understand what happened at the time, but as I get older, I like to think that he just wanted to be with us and see the joy of his family being together on Christmas, and then peacefully exited this existence. This is the moment I became a lifelong Sega fan and didn't deviate until they stopped making consoles with the Dreamcast. In fact, I have a very strong memory of my mom giving me the Dreamcast and telling me it would be the last video game console she would ever buy for me, which is really kind of fitting. Every Sega console since the Genesis was a gift from my mom. When she decided I'd have to start buying my own consoles, they stopped making Sega consoles. While I always defended Sega being the best, I still enjoyed playing other consoles. I just couldn't afford them at the time, so I had to pick one. Most of my friends had Super Nintendos, and it was a real treat to get to play them. By the time I turned 16, I got my very first job at Funko Land. I would show up to Funko Land every day after school. I would walk there and I would bother the employees, basically showing them how Ron Swanson I was about video games.
Hi there. Is there a project you're working on?
I know more than you.
All right.
And I told the manager at the time, I'm gonna keep showing up until you hire me. And eventually they did. I wore them down. That's when I could finally start buying my own things. Once I could afford to purchase my own consoles and video games, I really didn't understand the idea of being a fanboy about something. Why would you only choose one company? You would miss out on so many video games, and don't you love games? It really wasn't until I sat down to write this that it brought me back to that time. And yes, we want to feel like we made the right decision, so we're going to defend it, but for many of us, there's also an emotional aspect to it. And I would love to hear about a memory you have that revolves around video games. One of my favorite things about video games in general is you can come together with so many different types of people from all over the world around this love for the same thing. The one thing you can't get back is your time, so thank you for spending your time with me. But also, take some time for yourself. Mental health is incredibly important. And if nobody's told you yet today, know that you are loved. And I'll see you next time.